At a time when Europe appears to be on the brink of possible war, the presidents of the United States and Russia have kept a very narrow window of diplomacy open. Both leaders have agreed to meet in principle for a crisis summit to try and defuse the situation. But the White House insists the meeting will only take place if Russia doesn't attack Ukraine first. After a flurry of late-night diplomacy by President Emmanuel Macron, the Elysee Palace announced that US President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin had agreed that a summit could be useful. The details will be worked out this week when Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. But again, the Americans say that meeting can only take place if there is no Russian invasion. Within the last few hours, the Kremlin has said a Biden-Putin meeting may be premature. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said no concrete plan has been put in place for a meeting yet. The summit, proposed by France, could be expanded to include other stakeholders. President Macron had 2 phone calls on Sunday night with the Russian leader, one of them lasting over 90 minutes. Paris says both men agreed to work for a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine and also to intensify diplomatic efforts. And we are joined now by WION's correspondent Susan Teherani, who is in New York for us. So, Susan, the Kremlin suddenly casting some doubt over what late last night here looked like a possible breakthrough, a summit meeting of some kind between President Biden and President Putin. This presumably puts massive focus on the meeting that's due to take place in Europe later this week between the Secretary of State and Russia's foreign minister.
Yes, absolutely, Simon. It seemed like that meeting was going to take place, and it was very welcomed first by the Kremlin. However, we heard from the spokesperson of Kremlin saying that it's premature, quote, to talk about any specific plans for organizing some kind of summit. And what is right now planned is at the level of the foreign ministers, being with Secretary of State Blinken and Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. He also said, quote, if necessary, of course, the Russian and American president can decide to hold a telephone call or connect via other methods. Quote, a meeting is possible if the heads of state consider it appropriate. Now, this is, of course, after you mentioned an olive branch was extended by the White House to hold this summit between the Russians and the Americans. But it's hard to imagine that the Kremlin will not accept this meeting and the summit won't go ahead, considering the fact that many are now saying that Vladimir Putin, for the most part, has taken what has really been taken seriously at the end of the day. And this is something that he wanted, short of a complete invasion of Ukraine, and making his intentions very serious that, first of all, he doesn't want Ukraine being part of NATO, and second of all, making his ambitions for Europe's new security structure.
I think we've lost Susan Teherani there live in New York, which is a shame. But as she was saying, certainly Vladimir Putin has won the attention of the United States and its partners and allies in the United States after, of course, President Biden indicated last year he didn't want to be distracted by the Russians. I think Susan is back with us now, live from New York. Susan, let's talk about sanctions. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said over the weekend that the United States should be imposing them right now, that they shouldn't be waiting for a full-scale invasion of his country. And he was pointing, of course, to the tensions in eastern Ukraine that we witnessed over the weekend. And there was an indication from Secretary of State Antony Blinken that perhaps there will be some action taken against the Russians, even if there isn't the full-scale invasion that everybody worries about.
Right. During the Sunday shows, Antony Blinken went on more than 3 networks, or 3 networks if I counted correctly, on CNN, NBC, and CBS. The same questions were posed to him. First of all, what would be the red line for you to take these measures? When will you impose sanctions against Russia? And, his quotes were basically similar. I'll read one of them. He said the purpose of the sanctions, this is to CNN, in the first instance is to try to deter Russia from going to war. As soon as you trigger them, that deterrent is gone. And until the last minute, as long as we can try to bring a deterrent effect to this, we're going to try to do that. Basically saying that we're not going to impose sanctions until the tanks are rolling in. That's sort of paraphrasing what he said to all of them. He was pressed on whether, Russia is going to sort of keep this low-level attack if it does, whether it's with separatists, whether it's with cyber attacks, and that was coming from Margaret Brennan from CNN, and he acknowledged in not so many words that those were conversations that did indeed come up in Munich, and that there are plans to counter Russia if that happens. However, he said that he would not go into detail on how the West and the United States would respond if sort of these kind of attacks do continue. But he made very clear that as a diplomat, his job is to move with the diplomatic path forward. But I think you're right. We did learn that the United States and the West does have a plan in place that, there are going to be two different scenarios, whether or not it's a full-on invasion or whether or not, which is very likely that Russia decides to sort of have these small incursions or I don't want to call it minor, but sporadic, so to say, and the United States does plan to respond to those as well.
Susan, I'm glad we got you back, and I'm sure we will be seeing you later in the week. That's WION's correspondent in New York, Susan Tehrani, joining us live today.